Thanks a lot for joining in all the panelists over here. We are yet again, discussing a very important panel topic here is Atmanirbhar Bharat emerging opportunity for healthcare domain. So we have good panelists from various segments here from the healthcare fraternity who is going to elucidate about us this important topic, and I would like to welcome the panel here. Dr. K.M. Cherian, cardiac surgeon, Frontier Lifeline Hospital. Thanks a lot sir, for joining in. And Dr. K. Hari Prasad, MD, President, Hospital Division, Apollo Enterprise Limited. Thanks a lot, Dr. K. Hari Prasad, for joining in. And Dr. Harish Pillai, Chief Executive Officer, Aster India, Aster DM. Thanks a lot, Mr. Pillai, for joining in. And we have Mr. Rupak Barua, the Director and Group CEO of AMRI Hospital. And we have Mr. Vivek Tiwari, Founder and CEO of Medica Bazaar. And the moderator for the session would be Dr. Rana Mehta, Partner Healthcare Leader, PwC. Over to you, Dr. Rana. We are expecting a very, good and interactive session. Over to you, Dr. Rana.
No, thank you, Pratibha, and I must thank you for inviting all us. It's an honor to chair such a panel. I think when we talk about Atmanirbhar, I was a little taken aback because I think as far as Atmanirbhar is concerned, we've always been right at the forefront. Whether it's the medical manpower, whether it's doctors. In fact, we have been suppliers of medical manpower to the world. So I think the whole idea of how do we rebuild it for ourselves. The whole world has been dependent on India, whether it's doctors, nurses, technicians. So how do we build a viable thing in India so that all our citizens get the same quality of care which that same doctor provides in the US and the UK? We've also had a huge pull factor. If you look at medical tourism, India leads in medical tourism. And, it's both the quality and the cost. Sometimes the costs are 1/10 of what it costs. But it's not only a price arbitrage, it's also a skill arbitrage. Today, if you have a child in Africa who has a hole in the heart, you don't have an option. The skill arbitrage in India is so high, you need to bring him here. If you look at pharma, we are the largest generic manufacturer in the world. 1/3 of the generics sold in the United States are actually produced in India. When you look at medical technology, maybe that's where it's a difference. 70% of the large medical equipment actually is imported. That's beginning to change, an area of concern. But I think as we go ahead to build it, Atmanirbhar, I think the most important thing we must remember is viability of industries. For manufacturers, providers, payers, it's a viability. So how do we generate demand? Because demand is very, very weak. Yeah, even if you look at some of the large medtech players, we have 140 million population, but we still are a 1 or 2% when it comes to the actual uptake of medical devices in many sectors globally. So I think that's a cause of concern. Unless we build that demand, it's not likely that manufacture will take place in one of the areas. I'll begin with Dr. Cherian, and Dr. Cherian, honor to have you here. So one of the things I think India has really lacked is the basic research. We've been weak on the innovation side, the research side. So if you look at in the early 2000s, one of the things which possibly the United States was to put medical education, research, and the delivery of care together in an academic medical centers like the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic. And that brought out a lot of benefits for them, including, that after that, most of the Nobel Prize laureates in medicine actually came in from the United States. So Dr. Cherian, how do we address it? How do we put the building blocks on this component going ahead that we can reap the fruit?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Cherian, you're audible.
Okay. Now, you talked about medical tourism. and you talked about Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic. I was fortunate enough to have migrated to US and Australia way back in 1969. I did my cardiac surgery training both in Australia, New Zealand, and US, and I was a migrant there. I worked there, and then I decided that I will come back to India. And I was promised a job in the Indian Railways, which they didn't give me after I came back. Now, I might be very candid in my talk. Please forgive if I am offending anybody. Now, number one, I came to railways and worked in railways, which is, as you know, is one of the largest employer in the country, 1.3 million. Now, from there, I shifted. But the reason why I came back is mainly to see that whatever I have learned, I could replicate. And as a result of that, within 2 weeks of my coming back to India, in an unknown place like Railway Hospital, we could do the first coronary bypass surgery in the country, the first infant surgery, and the first lung transplant or heart and lung transplant. All these. Now, professionally, I got completely, you know, I mean, full satisfaction. I can't complain at all. I'm not complaining about the money also. Because when I was drawing $58,000, I came and joined for 1,071 rupees. That's also okay. But when we talk about medical tourism, I can boldly say that I started medical tourism in this country by operating on 20 Iraqi poor, destitute kids first time, and that is how the medical tourism started. In fact, we used to do few places from Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. But now it has become all over. We used to operate from US, operate from UK, from Eastern European countries, Russia, etc. etc. So medical tourism, if you give good results at a cheaper rate is not important, but good results. And that human touch, these are the important things which we can still cash in. But I'm not going to talk anything about that. You talked about basic research. I have done, I did whatever is possible for basic research. But, you know, the whatever I have tried to do, I did not have any support from the government. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We started, say for example, I'll tell you just one example. 2010, we had an advertisement put up by the Department of Science and Technology for innovation, because we are talking about innovations and you are talking about all new development. And that innovation was mainly whatever you want to innovate and get in touch with uh, government agencies, and we also applied. What we applied was to have a small pump which will augment the heart so that hypertensive patients will not go in for heart failure. This was put up by the Australian government, that was known as Australia India Research Foundation, AISR of round 10. We applied and we got a letter from the Department of Science and Technology congratulating that your project has been approved and you can start functioning. And we needed some money, they will do that. and we completed the first phase and the second phase. I mean, the first phase. The first phase we completed within 5 months, and we did 6 peaks, and all the 6 peaks did well. And when we informed Department of Science and Technology, they said contact DBT. We contacted DBT. They said, yeah, you have done a fantastic work, everything, but we will not be able to do you. We spent 2.6 crores as a private institution. No private hospitals, which you represent will do that, because if it is too commercialized, you are not going to spend the money. And the reason why the government said they won't support is, what will India get? So when we wrote to the Australian government, they said first year for Indian patients it will be less than 10%, then second year 15%, third year 20%, and fourth year, if everything is going well, they will give us license to manufacture, and they wanted to put up a manufacturing unit in our SEZ. We are the only hospital in this country which has got a special economic zone in medicine in this country. No other hospital can claim that, including All India Institute of Medical Science. Now, nothing has happened. No encouragement. So when you talk about all these things, it is easy to talk. Make in India, okay, healthcare, fine. And we had even tried to miniaturize a artificial heart, which is made by Medtronic. I, in fact, went and represented it to Mr. Ratan Tata, because TITCO, which is one of our partners, is also a shareholder in Titan. Titan has made the thinnest watch in the world, the Edge. And this artificial heart, which weighs 125 grams, and Dr. Vivekanand, who is the professor of miniaturization, he said we can miniaturize and make it 125 grams with 6 liter output. I gave that also to the government. They never bother. So when you talk about all these things, it is easy unless you are in that. And we have lost all the money. The hospital itself has been put up by NCLT. So I feel for it. After having come back to serve the country, this is what you got. We have been declared bankrupt. Nobody in this panel can say that they have become bankrupt, which has been declared by the highest authority, that is NCLAT. So this is my experience. And I think we only talk. And I had raised this with our Honorable Prime Minister also. He said some policy changes have to be done. It is 2 years now. No policy changes. So I may not be going in the same. Now, when we are talking about this Bharat uh, or Ayushman, we are not part of it. The reason is this: we are already serving people under CM scheme or CGHS, ECHS, all these schemes. And we also have been having a PPP for Pondicherry government, and we have been doing under public private partnership. No corporate hospital is doing it. But satisfaction is that professional satisfaction and the gratitude of the patients. That is what I consider most important. If you are respected in your profession by your own professional colleagues, that is the highest honor and recognition you can get. That's all I look for. I don't want to talk anything more. If you have got any questions, you can ask me, because I am one who has experienced myself. And I can also say I'm one of the people who came back leading two migrant students. Then, not now, about 45 years ago. Thank you for
No,
the opportunity.
thank you, Dr. Cherian. I think that was really inspirational to find out, how did you come back and, your experience. So I think one of the things which you said is it requires very strong commitment from the government, right? Because unless we have policies in place and they're actually implemented on ground, this situation could continue for years. So thank you, Dr. Cherian. I'll move to uh, Dr. Hari Prasad. Dr. Hari Prasad, I think, the pandemic really exposed the fragility of, our healthcare sector, both in the private as well as the public sector. I think we were very good at treating acute diseases, less good at treating chronic diseases. But now, when a triple burden of disease came, we were found lacking, both in terms of our ability to diagnose, treat, and prevent the spread of the pandemic. So, Dr. Hari Prasad, there've been a lot of learnings during this year, and you as part of Apollo, one of the largest institutions. So, what do you think? What could be some of the learnings we should instill into a new both health policy as well as ensure that they are not forgotten? Because this may not be the last pandemic we've had to face. Dr. Hari Prasad.
Thank you, Rana, and it's a privilege to be on this forum. I think we were always Atmanirbhar, just as you were saying at the beginning in the opening remarks, Rana, in terms of healthcare, but we never spoke enough about it. Yesterday, I was listening to the Honorable Prime Minister speaking at the World Economic Forum, and a major part of his talk was about healthcare and how we managed COVID and how self-reliant India was in terms of healthcare and how it was able to serve the world in terms of PPEs, in terms of pharma, in terms of vaccination. So it is good that the pandemic has actually brought healthcare into the forefront and has made people talk, and as people are now realizing that the Indian healthcare is right up there. One of the things that we learned during the pandemic is to be prepared for the unexpected, because you never know what's going to strike you and you need to be prepared for the unexpected. And this was a new virus which very little was known about, and the situation was very dynamic. It kept changing right from the diagnostic to the therapeutic. And then much later we realized that there is something called the post-COVID syndrome which needed care. So it is always evolving, and I think it is still evolving. So one of the things which we learned was to remain dynamic, to remain in the current situation, and to learn from global best practices. I think as far as healthcare knowledge is concerned, it's a borderless world, and information is traveled fast. In fact, there was an information diarrhea in terms of in terms of the pandemic. So we need to be smart enough to pick up the most relevant and right information, and be prepared to adopt it with a short incubation period, and be able to reach out to the community with the best possible diagnostic, therapeutic, and rehabilitative care. That's been one of the most important things the pandemic has taught us. And second thing is, it has actually demonstrated India's capability to rise up to a situation within a short span of time. Like all of us know, when we started off, there was only one lab in the country which could do the RT-PCR for this virus. But now you can get it done at multiple places across the country, and we've grown far beyond that. We did not have enough intensive care beds, and the country in multiple places has shown how intensive care beds and acute care beds, when required, could be created overnight in large numbers. So India has the capability, inbuilt capability, but we have a very important choice to make. The pandemic has thrown up a great opportunity for the healthcare sector as a whole, be it the providers, be it the pharma, be it the manufacturing industry or the tech industry. And that is we have a choice to make whether we want to go the US way or we want to go the China way. But I think India has a capability of getting the scale of China at a cost which is much lower than what the US gives us. So I think we need to create that hybrid which is cost effective and still scalable. And I think we are in an optimal position to do that. And we, like every difficult situation throws up an opportunity. I think this is the opportunity the pandemic is thrown up. And I think the Indian healthcare sector as a whole needs to make best use of this.
No, thank you, Dr. Hari Prasad. I think, like you said, the pandemic's thrown out an opportunity, and we must not let it go waste because, even after 75 years of our independence, healthcare is one area which is not received. But and I think it's great that it's now become part of the political discourse. Harish, I'll go to you next. And one of the things which we always pride ourselves about is the manpower in India, whether it's the doctors. And Dr. Cherian, like he said, he went abroad, but he came back. So it's the quality of the doctors, quality of nurses, the paramedical, and even the quality of people who administer hospitals. But that's again become a challenge, right? Because both retention, recruitment, and making sure that the profession itself is lucrative for new people to join. So how do you see this panning out in the next 5 years? No matter what we do, this is going to be one of the pillars of the Atmanirbhar healthcare in India.
Thank you, Dr. Rana, for having me in this eminent panel discussion. Just wanted to reflect back on some of the comments made by Dr. Cherian. Dr. Cherian is well recognized both nationally and internationally for the kind of efforts which he has put in. And if you look at one generation of doctor entrepreneurs, including Dr. Cherian, Dr. Pratap C. Reddy, Dr. Naresh Trihan, Dr. Devi Shetty, the kind of capacity and scale what they've created in our country for mentoring and training top-end clinicians has been, I don't think we have seen this kind of scale anywhere else in the world. And that contribution will always be recognized and talked about. Answering your question, the past 4-5 years, we have seen dramatic changes in policy because clearly our policymakers have not kept pace with the changing demographics and the changing disease pattern. We have this dual challenge of the burden of non-communicable diseases and also the re-emergence of communicable diseases, not necessarily in the pattern which we used to see in the 50s and 60s, but the new age bugs which are troubling us. Whether now we have COVID-19, just 2-3 years back, we were struggling with the Nipah virus and whatnot. So this is a dual set of challenges what we have. Some of the policy changes which I would like to highlight, sometimes we misunderstand that these policy changes are not necessarily in the scope of traditional healthcare. I really admired the government's effort to put a great focus on cleanliness and public hygiene in the form of Swachh Bharat and to declare the country as an open defecation-free nation. I think that really is the right step and much needed step in spite of so many decades of our independence. Number two, I felt that the approach of providing free cooking gas to the rural masses was very interesting in terms of reducing the burden of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease to a large segment of the population, which were using the traditional firewood for their livelihood. That's the second point of. Third is, of course, many South Indian states have already pioneered having fortified nutritious meals for the school children. The midday school scheme has been a great success in encouraging children not just to go to school, but obviously to change their nutrition profile. Now there is a talk of also adding a nutritious breakfast in the menu for these kind of school children. That's the third aspect. Fourth aspect, which I think is landmark, we can sit and debate over the granularity of it, but Ayushman Bharat and the PMJ scheme of providing a safety net to 500 million citizens, and I'm quite sure that it will be expanded further, was I guess a pivotal event in our country's healthcare history to give that accessibility and to also reduce the incidence of episodic poverty due to exposure to private healthcare. So I think that was something quite remarkable. Fourth, I would say, is the policy reformation, which was much needed in aspects of clinical governance, education governance, the reformation of the Medical Council of India, and to put in the new National Medical Commission. I think it will really play a key role in increasing the funnel and improving the supply chain of healthcare professionals, which we need. Few other niche areas which we can also touch about: the parity provided to the National Board of Exams for the DNB stream, along with the MCI recognized courses, will also help us to more than double the current level of postgraduates in the country, which is where the big gap is, what we see. On the nursing side, couple of reforms already announced by the Nursing Council of India in terms of the skill progression for nurse practitionership, specialty nurses, that will also aid in helping them to get certain competency level. There are also some more steps which we need because of the size of a country and the scale of a country in terms of looking at ensuring grassroots presence of healthcare workers, that some of the repetitive skills perhaps need does not require either co-nursing or even a doctor to be present. It could be provided for workers who can be certified by the Healthcare Skill Council. So skilling India is also, I think it's a great opportunity for our country to ramp up and also reduce the cost of manpower. So all in all, if you look at from a policy change point of view, the past 6 7 years have been quite remarkable, and it has given us a certain foundation to scale up significantly going forward. Last point in this area of augmentation of human resources is the big availability of digital in a significant way. If many of us across the country, we could manage to continue providing services to our patients, mainly due to the availability of teleconsultation services, specifically in the first quarter stringent lockdown. And that is, I think, going to be a game changer where our country is concerned, because we'll be able to exponentially reach much more of the population than before. So the best, I feel, is yet to come, Rana. Thank you.
No, I think very encouraging, and like when Dr. Hari Prasad said, I think we should put in the building blocks. Some of them are there, but really see how can we, because we may not get this opportunity again. Next, I'll go to Rupak. Rupak, one of the things with healthcare is that it's global, right? We're talking about Atmanirbhar, but the healthcare needs are often met with the supply chains which are global. Knowledge which is global, innovation which comes in globally. So, as we talk about Atmanirbhar, how much of this actually addresses the healthcare needs? And we should not get into emotional rhetoric where we lose out on the world because we don't have access to some technology or pharmaceuticals. How do you see this panning out as we build it in India, a very robust system, but we also take the best from the world globally?
Thanks, Rana. Yes, of course, that there's if we see this year, the Atmanirbhar Bharat we are all talking about today, it has come out from this year Honorable Prime Minister's announcement that in the peak time of this year pandemic, that in the month of May, actually, he has announced that India should be an Atmanirbhar and self-reliant. That is absolutely one point which we have come to know that maybe this is a pandemic. Actually, we have a lot of taught with the pandemic. There is a lot of lessons we got from this year pandemic, and we could understand that how to turn crisis into opportunity and create a self-reliant India. So that was the whole discussion. Now, when we are talking about in terms of this your healthcare delivery system or India and how we can make it more Atmanirbhar, see, it is though we had a lot of suffering in this your pandemic time, but it surely provides an opportunity to bring about long-needed change in your healthcare delivery in India. That is definitely is a one point that we can do a lot of changes. And the question comes is actually the self-sufficient in Indian healthcare system And it's a healthcare system, if we look into, it is not one part actually. It's a lot of things involved. It's the manufacturing, it's the research and development, production of raw materials and equipment. So many things are involved, providing a better healthcare to the community. Now, yes, of course, some of my previous speakers, they have talked about this your manpower, which is very important. Whenever you are making this your self-reliant India, manpower is one of the big issue. But my understanding, Rana, that is that when we are talking about, as you have mentioned, it should not be an emotional, not an emotional one. There is a once we are talking about Atmanirbhar in terms of your healthcare, yes, of course, during this pandemic time, healthcare actually is in the focus point, and everybody could understand what is the importance of healthcare. Now, this it should not be related to only the announcement of the Atmanirbhar, or maybe whatever way that we are discussing about that we should be a self-reliant. But there is a lot of changes is required in terms of your, the policy protocols. There is a lot of changes is required in terms of your in the government level. That is a lot of changes is required. Now, when we are talking about this your raw materials and all, see, one of the major area of concern in healthcare, that people, there is a misconception that is a private healthcare is very expensive. There is a lot of misunderstanding happening, a lot of incidents happening. Now, people doesn't understand that what is the cost involved in the giving a better quality care to an individual. Now, this measure of the cost part, if we see, that is a consumable and the pharmacy, medicine. That is a major cost which we incur. Yes, of course, we have talked about the manpower as well. Manpower also, fixed cost also a big area of concern. That already our previous speaker that they have pointed out, that is that we need a proper kind of a balanced kind of a human resources which should be in place. But now in India we are talking about medicine. See, earlier we used to know that India is a pharmaceutical industry and that it's known as the pharmacy of the world. But over the time, what has happened, though we are dominating majorly in the pharma industry, but the raw material, if we are talking about what we produce this your medicine, there is almost 67 to 70% of the raw materials still comes from China. And many of the companies that are those who used to make these your raw materials during 1980s, they have shifted their base to China because of lot of benefits they are getting in terms of electricity, in terms of maybe statutory compliances, lot of things they are getting support, and they have shifted their base. So one part being the major one of the component of your cost structure when we are talking about the Atmanirbhar and where our whole objective is how we can reduce the cost to the patient, affordability, how we can make it. So that is one part that the medicine, yes, of course, the lot of changes it needs in terms of your policies, and we should start a production of our own, including the raw materials in terms of medicine. Consumable, yes, of course, still if you see this your consumable and the medical equipment, still we are depending on this your external sources, foreign medical equipment, consumables, we are still almost 50 to 60% still we are looking from the other countries. Now, here we see this that the consumable, if you really want to reduce the cost, because a certain percentage, a sizable percentage of the your healthcare cost is related to your consumable. We have seen in the past, in the pandemic time, the PP cost, the N95, whereas the one PP cost was 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 during the initial time. It has come down to 100, 125 rupees. And the N95, we never used to know how to make this N95. And that gets used to buy around 250, 300 rupees. It has come down to 20, 25 rupees. So yes, of course. So if you make it of your own, then definitely there is a cost control we can do, and that we can share to the patient, so that we can reasonably reduce the cost of the your healthcare. Now you see there is a lot of low cost, that a lot of schemes that the government is announcing, the insurance schemes, the local, your Ayushman Bharat, there is in Bengal, there is a Swasthya Society, that's they are giving around 50 to 60% less cost compared to your standard cost. So how we will compensate that cost? Yes, of course, that is one manpower cost. We are talking about fixed cost, but variable cost you are talking about. we need to reasonably, we need to reduce this, your own production of your consumables, own production of your medical equipment, one production of your generic medicine, good quality generic medicine. Lot of we should go for innovations. And one thing also we had made it is your digital space. Yes, of course, we had made a lot of progress in the digital space. Almost 12,000 to 15,000 startups has been created. The active startups, they are all supporting healthcare, and we are trying to reduce the cost of this one. So if we can, one way, my conclusion is that if we really want to look for Atmanirbhar Bharat, yes, of course, it is possible. Maybe it will take some more time, but we need a lot of changes when we'll be able to make healthcare affordable and accessible. And if we start reducing the cost, we can restructure the whole cost structure in healthcare. Then we'll be able to more, that allure this your international patients, your medical tourism we can promote. Already we are much less compared to any of the foreign countries. Your the 1/5, 1/7 cost, but still further we can allure patients because they are much lesser cost will be able to deliver medical services. So that is the one part my take, and it is possible. But yes, of course, we look forward a lot of changes in the policy making decisions.
No, thanks, Rupak. And I think what you also said is now we have an advantage as it's part of the political discourse in India, healthcare, to get those fundamental changes done and give healthcare the priority it's always deserved. Because at the time of independence, right, we tried to do a national health service, but obviously, given the tax collection, that was difficult. Today, the government's moved away from a provider to becoming a payer. But as it makes those payments, it needs to be effective so that the viability of the sector comes in, and that will only drive growth beyond the urban conglomerates. Vivek, I go to you next. So one of the challenges I think with as we become more and more is actually dependent on Indian companies for medical consumables, pharmacies, supplies, is actually getting it across to the smaller cities, the tier 3, tier 4, rural India. Because many of these cities, they don't have a shortage of skill sets. The doctors are skilled, but their ability to manage supply chain, their ability to manage inventory, not run out, make sure that they have the right consumables for a surgery tomorrow, is difficult because many of them are not trained. So how is Medica Bazaar approaching this, and how do you see the opportunity in the coming 5 years in this space?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Rana, and thank you, Elets, for having me here on this panel. Hope I am clearly audible. So taking some cues from Mr. Rupak Barwa's pointers towards the cost of input cost, essentially towards consumables and pharma in the healthcare delivery, and also bringing some light on my past experiences. In fact, I founded Medica Bazaar in 2015, but before that, I traveled extensively throughout tier 2, 3, scouting for opportunities to set up tertiary care clinics in India. And while doing that, I would have met at least maybe 2,500 kind of medical centers all over India, especially into tier 2 and 3 remote locations, and realized there was a great pain in terms of looking at the operational efficiency for healthcare delivery. It might be related to various factors, which is including manpower, input cost of raw material, availability of raw material. Price inconsistency was a very, very big challenge. And manufacturers had no control on it because beyond a point, in a country like India, which is highly led by multiple levels of distribution and intermediaries, manufacturers do not have great control on the end customer pricing, because they are also held by the fact that they have to depend on various intermediaries to reach out to the end customer. And it is practically impossible to reach out to 650,000 villages in India and 718 districts and set up your ability to reach out to each and every customer. In last 6 years, essentially from 2015, just to give you some lights on what we did, Dr. Rana. We set up about 100,000 customers, kind of engagement with Medica Bazaar, especially into tier 2, 3. And these are all either daycare centers, mostly daycare centers, nursing homes, smaller hospitals, less than 100 bed, less than 50 bed. Some of them may have, become non-existent in last 5 to 6 years, primarily because they could not sustain the challenges of cash flow, sustainability, growth, and then obviously would have got wiped out in the process. But the numbers are ever increasing for obvious reason, because there is a latent need for medical care in our country, and this cannot be met by the largest of institutions, because there is obviously a huge capex burden on these institutions to serve the population in our country. I really admire what Apollo has been doing, or what DM Healthcare has been doing, but we also need to be aware of the fact that 70% of our population stays in rural India. And for them, the first point of healthcare delivery, or the first point of medical care, starts with the chemist shop nearby. They would go to the chemist shop and ask for the medicine, and do not go to hospital because of fear of the cost, because they think that going to hospital is a burdensome affair for them. Primarily because the government has not taken any initiative in improving the medical insurance access in the country, which has largely been part of this budget, which we were just speaking some time back. The incentivization of medical insurance penetration in the country has been particularly lacking. And secondly, the population has been primarily dependent on private healthcare, because the public facilities were in a dilapidated state. Today, we are thinking of bringing healthcare budget to 2.5% of entire GDP. And that was the step that was needed maybe a decade or a 2 decade back in a country which is as big as 140 crore population. So I think it is important for our country to really look at the existence and the need for these smaller institutions in tier 2 and 3, for obvious reason, because it is solving a great problem of medical care into about 60 to 70% of our population. And that's what we are trying to achieve through Medica Bazaar, bringing digital initiatives to get to these customers. Today, practically, we are actually reaching out to about 50,000 customers in a month, and trying to create an access route for manufacturers to reach out to these customers as well. And it is a never-ending process. We know that we are nowhere, but still we have to keep driving and pushing it harder. It's not an easy industry to get into. But we have seen a great encouragement coming from customer groups, especially from tier 2, 3, from nursing home segment, from daycare segment, and they are really looking at such kind of opportunities to engage with an enterprise model of procurement, which is transparent, which really solves the problem of accessibility, as brought in by Mr. Barua just about in his thoughts. The affordability, because you need to provide them with the best optimum costing, because we all know very well that the healthcare delivery cost is not going to go high and high, right? It's going to become even more competitive in coming days. What is more relevant is to how do you stay within your cost ambit to make sure that you are able to offer the best delivery experience in the same budget. I think that's where Medica Bazaar becomes a great opportunity for these, these facilities all over India. And if you talk about the concepts like, say, GPOs in US, which came in about a century back, right? In US, which is about 5 to 6 times of the total healthcare spend, what India does. Just about 1/3 of the population, maybe less than 1/3 of the population, and 5 to 6 times kind of an spend. We really don't need that kind of a model to come in India, because we don't have that kind of budget. But we really need those kind of practices to come in. So a century back when the GPO started, I'm sure that it took quite a while for a GPO kind of a model to be successful, which caters to about 96 to 97% of healthcare delivery experience in US. I think it is also important for country like India to have similar models. So we are working closely with various manufacturers group, hospitals group, maybe from large to small to micro centers to create such kind of experience. And we really want to take it forward. So I don't want to take much more time. I think we're just nearing the time limit. These are my thoughts.
No, thanks, Vivek. I think it's very important because I think one of the things is unless you build a very strong healthcare ecosystem beyond the larger cities, we'll never be able to make healthcare accessible and affordable. And what you said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Some of the best practices already known to us, but we can't do it in a US paradigm. We have to do it in an Indian paradigm, and those are very different learnings as we go ahead. I'll go to next to Mr. Jatin Mahajan, who's the MD of J Mitra and Company, and the leading manufacturers of medical devices, especially on the IVD side. So I think there's been a lot of interest in this area. The second component also, I think, during the pandemic, diagnostics came to the forefront. It was an industry which also within the healthcare industry saw really a V-shaped recovery. So I just wanted to look at, as we go ahead, we look more at manufacturing, we look at more being dependent within facilities within India. What's been the experience and what do you think are some of the suggestions we should look at or the government should look at going ahead?
Good afternoon, everyone. And Dr. Anna, thank you for asking such a wonderful question. And basically, what I would like to say is being Atmanirbhar is a huge, huge responsibility, and it also offers a tremendous opportunity. While India has stressed on the importance of being Atmanirbhar or self-reliance, its healthcare manufacturing capacity to reduce its dependence on imported products is there. As I think probably you mentioned a few minutes back, 75% of the equipments are still imported, and there are a couple of reasons for that. I'll be talking about those reasons in a few moments. Well, during the pandemic, there have been many interesting insights. Like in the last 72 years, never ever the spotlight has happened on the diagnostics industry. Now, let me give you an example here. So we had a lot of challenges during pandemic. For certain products like the PPE or the safety kits, or whether it's diagnostic test kits, so the manufacturing capacity was absolutely zero, nil, because as somebody, the panel members said, this was for the first time that everybody had this challenge of this virus. It came out in the month of December. So everybody had to start from the ground. And fortunately, in a very short period of time, most of the manufacturers were able to build up the capacity. So from a level of nil capacity, we went to a level of sufficient capacity. And today, I'm happy to share that most of the manufacturers have such a huge capacities that we are ready to export and put India on the world map and earn foreign exchange for our country. So this is exactly what Atmanirbhar is all about. And I'll also like to share some of our own company's stories, right from the inception when we actually launched our diagnostic kits. We have always worked on this philosophy of being self-reliant. I'd like to share a story of HIV diagnostic test kits when we launched way back in 1995. So there were 9 players in the market. And out of the 9 players, 8 were dominated by the foreign companies. And we, through our innovation, through our USP of the product, through our fair prices, what we did was over a period of time, we actually dominated the space. Until date, we are dominating the testing space for the HIV in the rapid analyzer category. Now, in 2000, the same success story was repeated. Like, again, we wanted India to be self-reliant in testing. We should not be dependent on any of the foreign companies, because the problem in imports is that there is a volatile foreign exchange fluctuation, which actually increases the cost of the test kits and actually ultimately burdens the common man. And also, because of this, another reason is that the diagnostic kits are actually unreliable. Some of the manufacturers in this space, they provide unreliable test kits, and what we have seen in during the pandemic. Some of the kits have actually been unreliable in terms of the results. So, for example, therefore, in hepatitis B and hepatitis, same story we have repeated. And what we have seen is we are also dominating this space. So, what has happened is we have innovated, we have had a fair pricing, and also, very importantly, we have reduced the pricing by 50%. And that's a huge, huge advantage. This has also resulted in huge, people being employed by us and related ancillary industries. Now, coming to dengue also, in dengue 2009, again, we had 4 5 companies and dominated by foreign players. And through our innovation practices and Indian fair pricing, we were able to reduce the cost of testing by more than 60%. And today, we are the number one players as far as dengue diagnostic test kits are concerned. Well, having said that, as what Dr. Cherian also has said, and other esteemed panel members have also said, and I agree with them that, the intent is great. And I agree with this intent of being Atmanirbhar. But on the ground, there's a big, big gap. The implementation needs to improve with the time-bound action plan, because if that doesn't happen, the impact or the results will not be seen. We also, through our local association of IMED, we have made a lot of representations to the government in terms of raising our concerns as to how we can have a level play with respect to the imported companies, foreign companies. Now, let me share some of the concerns that we have. The draft policy of the medical device is yet to be implemented, and this should be implemented immediately. And by implementing this, it will have a big, big impact on the growth of the industry. The other challenging situation that we as a company, as industry, we are facing is the issue of the inverted duty structure. Now, with respect to inverted duty structure, the homegrown companies face a disadvantage of at least 15% duties which are imposed on the homegrown companies. Whereas if anybody imports the test kits, they get an advantage of 15%, which means in terms of pricing, they get an advantage. And this discourages the homegrown companies to invest in this particular industry. If this correction can be done, it will actually encourage local homegrown companies to invest more in this industry, thereby giving more employment to people in their respective areas, regions, and overall the industry will grow at a pan-India level. Now, having said that, most of the diagnostic players also are in the MSME sector, and for our customers, what is important is the quality of the product. And with this, what I want to highlight is there has to be a homegrown certification body also. A strategy has to be evolved so that which has to be economical. It has to evolve so that homegrown companies can go in for this certification. Maybe there can be some incentivization. I'm not saying that it should be done for a long period of time, but just enough so that we can have a foot firmly on the ground. Then there has to be a global strategy also, so that this homegrown certification, which is called ICMED, which is Indian Certification of Medical Device Industry, is equivalent to the likes of CE and US FDA. If that is there, then what will happen is the Indian manufacturers will be able to launch their products in these countries in the efficient manner. And actually, the cost of the cost of the time invested would also reduce, because with the equivalence of certification, the launch would be much faster. Another thing is there has to be, during this pandemic, what has happened is the connect, the industry academia connect needs to be there. And internationally, this bonding is very strong. But in India, this needs to strengthen, because not all companies can come up with all diseases. So if this connect is there, then we can launch products. We can give this project to the institution, and they can come up with a solution, and we can launch the solution in the shortest possible time. Another critical aspect is the Make in India. So if we are actually competing with the likes of other countries, and if we want that Make in India should be a success story in India, then we must have certain strategies in place, which means that our regulatory approvals should be much faster. The government approval should be much faster. There should be single window clearances. There should be ease of doing business. There should be adequate financing. Even there should be soft loans with longer repayments, and this should be something coming up in the coming upcoming budget also. So these are some of the things that I thought, some of the concerns which I thought which I should be sharing here. Having said that, there are a lot of positive developments which have happened over the past couple of years to make the domestic healthcare manufacturing and services space more self-reliant. And if we had to compete with the global companies and in the global world space, there has to be a very serious intent required. And I think the opportunity is right, and opportunity is now. We should be able to grab it. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Jatin. I think that had a lot of points about how can we operationalize this. I think from moving from the rhetoric to actually what's happening on ground. So I must want to thank all the panelists. I think we had a very engaging session, starting with Dr. Cherian, where he spoke that, if we were to really do research, we would lead the world. We need to look at a paradigm shift in the way the private and public sector collaborates. Dr. Hari Prasad, some of the learnings about how we manage the pandemic. Going ahead, we have a triple burden of disease. How can the private and public sector work together? Harish, on some of the building blocks which have been put in by the government, and how do they need to be taken forward? How do we need to optimize manpower? I think Rupak, you gave a very good overview about, while we talk about Atmanirbhar, we should also look at that India doesn't get left out. And what are some of those policy changes which need to happen as we go ahead? And Vivek, I think very important that healthcare is not only in the cities, it's beyond the cities. And that's where the unmet need is. And many of this will not flourish unless they have access to equipment, consumables at the correct place in the correct time. And I think that's probably one of the biggest areas which we need to address. And Jatin, finally, I think wonderful to say, what were the practical issues for Indian companies while we are trying to be Atmanirbhar, but there needs to be a paradigm shift in thinking and implementation as we go ahead. So I must thank everyone for being on this panel. It's been wonderful, and I think some of the points we brought up actually come up, and hopefully we all look forward to the budget on the 1st and see that it's about walking the talk. The rhetoric about how do we allocate more to healthcare, because we've all realized that healthcare can cause an economic meltdown, and that's never happened again before. So thank you very much, and over to you, Pratibha.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Rana Mehta, for conducting the session very smoothly, and I'm sincerely, my apologies to Mr. Jatin Mahajan. Sorry, I was not, I just skipped introducing you before the panel started, and my apologies for that. I don't think you need an introduction also, and each one of the panel here, they are experts in their own field. And it was a very important subject, and I think we had very deep insights from each one of you all. And with just 2 days for the budget, we are expecting a lot of activity again in the healthcare, spectrum. And we would also like to have your viewpoints, post budget. Please, our team from eHealth will get in touch with you all. Please give in your inputs, how we are meeting the expectations, how is the government meeting our expectations. Let's see. So thanks a lot to each panelist here again. And as a token of our appreciation, we just wanted to give the speaker certificate. My team in the back end, can you please present them? Dr. K.M. Cherian, cardiac surgeon, Frontier Lifeline Hospital. Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot, doctor, for joining in and giving your insights. Thanks, Dr. Cherian. And Dr. K. Hariprasad, MD, President, Hospital Division, Apollo Enterprise Limited. Thanks a lot, Dr. K. Hariprasad, for your time and inputs. And Dr. Harish Pillai, CEO, Aster India, Aster Team Healthcare. Dr. Pillai, thanks a lot for the time and making it possible this time. Thank you. Mr. Rupak Barua, Director and Group CEO, MRI Hospital. Thanks a lot, Mr. Barua, for your interesting thoughts as well. And Dr. Rana Mehta, whom I always, text and irritate him a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Rana Mehta, for, we need your continuous support again. We'll be doing our 11th edition soon as well. And Mr. Vivek Tiwari, founder and CEO, Medica Bazaar. Thanks a lot, Mr. Tiwari, for joining in and giving your insights. And Mr. Jatin Mahajan, Managing Director, J. Mitra and Company. Thanks a lot. We will be sending you the certificates via mail soon. Thanks a lot to each one of you for this, beautiful session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.